Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our live coverage of the latest mission from Cape Canaveral Space Force Station. Will Robinson Smith, I'll be providing our commentary for the duration of this coverage. We're broadcasting from the Spaceflight Now News Bureau here at NASA's Kennedy Space Center. Got the team out today on a beautiful sunny Sunday here on Florida's Space Coast. Stephen Young is running the technical operations of our broadcast this afternoon. Adam Bernstein is out in the field getting ready to track the Falcon 9 rocket and do some still photography once it leaves the pad. Michael Caine has the evening off from launch photography, but keep a weather eye out and he may make a cameo appearance in the live chat. If you're not already following them on social media, Adam and Michael, that is, here are their handles on X. You can follow Adam Bernstein at aburn with an E, NYC. Michael Caine is over at MD Caine Jr. Adam was out with us this morning as the Crew 8 astronauts touched down over at Space Florida's launch and landing facility this afternoon. As we continue on through the broadcast, may give you a little peek at some of the photos he was able to capture as we continue on in the stream. We're also joined by our friends Chuck Briggs taking a look at his camera here, live view of the pad, Slick 40 over at Cape Canaveral Space Force Station. And Pete Carsons will also be joining in the mix as well. We're T-minus 57 minutes, 32 seconds and counting. Less than an hour, SpaceX will attempt to launch the Starlink Group 6-39 mission, poised to be the 11th dedicated mission launching SpaceX's Starlink V2 mini satellites this year. Currently, SpaceX is targeting a T0 liftoff time of 5:06 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. For our viewers joining from around the world, that is 22:06 UTC. If you'd like to help support our coverage of the space program, there's a quick and easy way to do that. Just by clicking the like button here on YouTube. Share the stream would also be of great help to us. And if you haven't already, be sure to subscribe to Spaceflight Now. When you do, click the bell icon and turn on all notifications. That way you'll get alerted whenever we do these live streams or new videos get posted. We're also powered by our wonderful channel members, so thanks to folks like Callistia Lee, Jamie Steckel, aka JJ, Martin, Titus Kitchen, many others who are joining already in the live chat. Really appreciate you all being here with us on a sunny Sunday afternoon. Channel membership comes with a number of perks, including discounts at our online shop, shop.spaceflightnow.com, access to member-only videos, and of course, live 4K views for all the launches lifting off from Florida's Space Coast. One last way you can support, if you'd also like to join in the conversation, is by using the YouTube Super Chat feature. Not only does that help support what we do here at Spaceflight Now, but you can also post a comment or a question, and of course, if it's appropriate to be read on the show, we'd love to answer that or comment on that for you, if possible. So our thanks to Mel Roberts Harold. Good to see you back here with us with a $5 Super Chat saying sunshiny and 65 degrees Fahrenheit in Chicagoland. Good to hear all is well up in the Windy City. Want to welcome a couple new channel members, actually. Sandy Benz and Cece joining us both at the pad leader level. Really appreciate that. Thanks for your support. Welcome aboard. Astro Joe, one of our wonderful moderators in the live chat, which if you haven't already, be sure to give props and support to Astro Joe and our other great moderators who help keep things flowing in the live chat, like Rusty Shackelford as well. See you coming in on a Sunday afternoon. Thanks to Astro Joe for gifting a Spaceflight Now membership. And to Richard Cochran for gifting 5 Spaceflight Now memberships. Really appreciate the generosity from you both. And if you're one of the lucky ones who is now a new Spaceflight Now member, be sure to thank them in the live chat if you haven't already. We're T-minus 54 minutes, 28 seconds and counting. Less than 20 minutes away from the point at which the launch director will give their go for the start of propellant load for this evening's launch. For those who haven't been with us on a recent flight, SpaceX no longer providing mission audio ahead of the final 5 minutes of the count, but we will rely on our extensive experience in covering this company and its Falcon 9 missions, so we will guide you through the count, talk about some of the visual cues that we're tracking to let you know that things are moving on as expected. SpaceX is running the countdown from its Hangar X site here at KSC. It's at the facility where they refurbish Falcon boosters and prepare them for future flights, as is the case with the one you see on your screen. We'll talk more about this particular booster as we get closer to liftoff. SpaceX also has support for this launch in part from the control room at their headquarters in Hawthorne, California. Again, this evening's launch is targeting liftoff at T0 at 5:06 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, 22:06 UTC for our friends joining around the world. SpaceX does have multiple backup opportunities, assuming they have not started the fueling process. This window of opportunity for today lasts until 8:34 p.m. Eastern. If for whatever reason SpaceX is not able to launch today, they do have a backup window available tomorrow on Monday that opens at 4:09 p.m. Eastern. Talking about the weather, you see sunny conditions here on Florida's Space Coast. I'll bump it out to the wide shot so you can see a little bit more of the, what some would call a Chamber of Commerce kind of a day. Coming into this launch opportunity, the 45th Weather Squadron forecast better than 95% odds of favorable weather for liftoff during the window. The primary concern for tonight, not much of one, but it is listed as the cumulus cloud roll, so keeping an eye on any potentially troublesome clouds that may drift into the area in the next 50-some minutes. Forecasters are also keeping an eye on the upper level wind shear, which is tracking between low and moderate levels. If needed, and they do have to pivot to the backup opportunity on Monday, weather forecast is largely the same, greater than 95% favorable weather at liftoff. Slightly better in the additional categories, as the upper level wind shear is not listed as a constraint to launch on Monday. We're T-minus 51 minutes, 38 seconds and counting. Before we go ahead and step through the countdown timeline, let you know what to expect and when to expect it, I want to thank a few more folks for their support. A couple of our channel members feeling extra generous today. Wicked Code, gifting 5 Spacefly Now memberships. Really appreciate that, Wicked Code. I love your profile picture with the 2 doggos in there. And Callistia Lee gifting 10 Spaceflight Now memberships. Really appreciate that, Callistia. Thank you so much for bringing some more folks into the Spaceflight Now fold, as it were. Turning to the countdown timeline, as we are now T-minus 50 minutes, 57 seconds and counting. Things kick off, of course, at T-minus 38 minutes. That's when the SpaceX launch director will take the poll on the start of propellant load. Again, we will not hear the call out, but that is when it will happen on the timeline. If that go-ahead is given, things will get rolling with rocket-grade kerosene being loaded onto both the first and the second stages, otherwise referred to as RP1. Same time, liquid oxygen is also pumped aboard the first stage. T-minus 16 minutes, the turn of liquid oxygen to start flowing onto the second stage. But before we get to that point, we'll see the so-called big vent from the strong back. That comes out at about T-minus 20 minutes and 30 seconds or so. At T-minus 7 minutes is the chill down of the 9 Merlin engines at the base of the Falcon 9 rocket. It involves flowing a small amount of liquid oxygen through the plumbing and the turbo pumps, protecting those engines from the risk of thermal shock and damage during the startup sequence. About 6 minutes out, the first stage kerosene tank should be full. Then at T-minus 4.5 minutes, we'll see the strong back retract sequence begin. It'll start with the payload or the clamp arms underneath the payload fairings opening up. Then the transporter erector, or the strong back, will recline about 1.5 degrees away from the rocket. It stays in that position until liftoff, at which point it pulls back in a much more rapid fashion to clear the way for the vertical climb of the Falcon 9. About 3 minutes out, LOX load on the first stage should be wrapping up. About 2 minutes out, liquid oxygen loading on the second stage will be complete, at which point the vehicle will be fully loaded with 1 million pounds of propellant. In the final 60 seconds, the control of the countdown is handed over from the ground sequencer to the Falcon 9's onboard flight computers. The propellant tanks are brought up to flight pressure. SpaceX launch director will give their go for liftoff at 45 seconds out. The engine ignition command is issued at T-minus 3 seconds. And of course, if all 9 Merlin 1D engines ignite and are healthy, the command for the hold down clamps will be issued to release the vehicle at T0. Again, that's targeting a liftoff this afternoon or early evening, however you want to think about it. Coming up at 5:06 p.m. Eastern, 22:06 UTC. We're now T-minus 48 minutes, 21 seconds and counting, just about 10 minutes or so away from the point of that poll taking place. We're now T-minus 46 minutes, 31 seconds and counting. As we are awaiting the launch of this Falcon 9 rocket, let's talk about where it will be going for all of those curious about this particular Falcon flight. Let's talk a little trajectory, shall we? The Falcon 9 is, of course, going to be lifting off from SpaceX's workhorse pad this evening. Space Launch Complex 40 over at Cape Canaveral Space Force Station, otherwise known as Slick 40. We'll fly in a southeasterly trajectory out toward the Caribbean. Following stage separation, the first stage will land on one of SpaceX's 3 drone ships. This evening, SpaceX is using a shortfall of gravitas. The upper stage will continue on with the Starlink satellites. The fairing halves will jettison just a bit downrange of the map as well. Go to this next graphic here so you can see what that process looks like as they glide on down to the waters of the Atlantic Ocean under parachutes. SpaceX has 2 East Coast base recovery vessels to scoop up these fairing halves. Tonight, the one on deck is Doug. It and the other recovery vessel, Bob, were named after former NASA astronauts Bob Behnken, Doug Hurley, the duo that flew aboard the Demo 2 mission back on May 30th of 2020. And as you can see in this slide from a SpaceX presentation earlier this year. They save about $6 million per recovery effort, so an important part of the SpaceX business model to be able to recoup these payload fairings. And this is an image of that recovery process en route. T-minus 44 minutes, 30 seconds and counting. As SpaceX continues to expand its Starlink internet coverage around the world, want to bring you up to speed on where things stand with that right now. This is the latest map showing the availability of Starlink in various countries around the globe. The brightest blue sections are where Starlink service is currently available. The darker shades of blue are either where service is pending or coming soon. And then the dark gray, that's not the ocean waters, of course, are countries that have no Starlink service and currently no plans to bring that capability on board there. If you happen to peruse our article about this launch before we got into our live coverage this afternoon, this will already be known to you, but SpaceX, just within this past week, made an announcement with the Bahamas Ministry of Tourism, Investments, and Aviation, a letter of agreement between the company and the country allowing for more SpaceX access as far as being able to stage their drone ships in an area closer to the Bahamas waters. Go here to an image from, let me see if I can do it like this. There we go. See an image of some folks from SpaceX and a delegation from the Bahamas who made a trek out to SpaceX headquarters in Hawthorne, California, standing underneath the Falcon 9 rocket, as you get a sense of the scale of that vehicle with all these folks in front. This partnership between SpaceX and the Bahamas will, as they describe it, offer a viewing opportunity for the Falcon 9 first stage boosters as they're landing on the drone ship. That'll be closer and within view of some of those islands in a way that they are hoping to mark as a tourism boon, something unique to that part of the world. Once that service starts kicking in place, we'll note just for the record that this particular launch, even though this is the first time SpaceX is launching 24 Starlink V2 mini satellites on board a Falcon 9 rocket, they are not using this capability to land closer to the Bahamas. As stated before, this is something that is still in the agreement working phase, so TBD on exactly when we'll see the first landing in that part of the Atlantic Ocean. SpaceX also purportedly to bring more concentrated Starlink internet access to various parts of the Bahamas and work with some of the school systems there as well. So a growing bit of space tourism for them, I'm sure, is more than welcome. We're now T-minus 41 minutes, 2 seconds and counting. Just about 3 minutes away from the launch director making the call on the start of propellant load for this evening's flight of the Falcon 9 rocket. Taking a look at the live chat briefly. I am Lita, one of our wonderful channel members, with a $5 super chat. Thank you, Lita. Who says, just want to thank Will Robinson Smith for your hard work keeping us updated and informed. Thankful for all of my new friends here. I'm certainly glad to help guide us all through this particular launch. It's a team effort behind the scenes. So props to all the folks here at Spaceflight Now, and of course our moderators in the live chat too. T-minus 36 minutes, 32 seconds and counting. At this point, SpaceX will have taken their poll on the startup propellant load, and assuming that they have given the go-ahead, prop load is about a minute away from starting. Again, that will begin with both liquid oxygen and RP1, or the rocket grade kerosene. RP1 is loaded onto both the first and the second stages of the vehicle. LOX, just the first stage to start. That's coming up now, less than a minute, assuming the go-ahead was given. As we're waiting for that process to begin and to see some good visual signs of it, though, let's talk about the first stage booster that is powering this vehicle. Let's talk a little booster history. This will be the 13th flight of this particular booster, tail number 1069 in the SpaceX fleet. Its flight pedigree began on December 21st, 2021. That was for the Commercial Resupply Services, or CRS-24 mission, sending up cargo and science supplies to the folks on the International Space Station at the time. It was followed on August 28th, 2022, with the launch of this booster's first Starlink mission. That was Starlink 4-23. The third launch came on October 15th, 2022, when it launched the Hotbird 13F satellite. It and another Eutelsat satellite would go on to replace Hotbirds 8, 9, and 10 at the company's 13° east position. The fourth launch of this booster was on December 8th. That was launch 15 for OneWeb, another company with a large low Earth orbit satellite internet constellation. This was one of a trio of missions assigned to SpaceX following the Russian invasion of Ukraine and the loss of the Soyuz rocket for OneWeb as a vehicle to get its satellites up to orbit. Launch number 5 came on February 2nd, 2023. That was the Starlink 5-3 launch. Next up, Luxembourg-based company SES. The SES 18 and 19 satellites launched on March 17th. Was followed up launches 7 through 12, all Starlink missions after this. First, we got Starlink 5-6 on May 4th. Starlink 5-12 on June 23rd. Starlink 6-9 on August 11th. Starlink 6-19 on September 30th. Starlink 6-28 on November 18th. And most recently, Starlink 6-36 back on December 29th. And just in the nick of time, we do have confirmation from SpaceX that propellant load has begun. And they do add to that all systems and weather are currently go for launch. So a good update from SpaceX as we're now just a little over 2 minutes into the propellant load process. And now RP1 is being loaded onto both the first and the second stages. LOX onto just the first stage for now. T-minus 32 minutes, 43 seconds and counting. We're now T-minus 31 minutes, 6 seconds and counting. In just about a minute, at about T-minus 30 minutes, cryogenic helium will be loaded onto the pressure vessels for the first stage. The helium is used to pressurize the main propellant tanks during flight. Then about 5 minutes after that, about T-minus 25 minutes, that same cryogenic helium will be loaded onto the storage tanks for the second stage. As we continue to step through the countdown process this afternoon, let's go ahead and take a look at the flight timeline for this Falcon 9 vehicle once it does leave the pad. Now that propellant load has begun, the T0 liftoff time of 5:06 p.m. Eastern, 22:06 UTC is locked in. If for whatever reason they do need to stand down from today's launch attempt, they do have a backup opportunity starting at 4:09 p.m. Eastern on Monday, February 26th. Because they've started fueling, they are committing to an attempt at this launch time, and they don't have an ability to pivot to later in their window. Assuming the Falcon 9 rocket does launch, though, at 5:06 Eastern, it'll pass through max Q at T plus 1 minute and 10 seconds. That's the point of greatest aerodynamic pressure on the vehicle. T plus 2 minutes and 27 seconds is first stage main engine cutoff, or MECO. It'll be followed in quick succession by stage separation 4 seconds later. Second after that, the Merlin vacuum engine will ignite for the second stage engine ignition, SES-1. A little over 30 seconds after that, the payload fairings protecting the Starlink satellites will be jettisoned. T plus 3 minutes and 5 seconds. As mentioned before, they will fall down and land in the Atlantic Ocean under parachutes, where Doug is ready and waiting to scoop them up. T plus 6 minutes and 19 seconds will be first stage entry burn. That ignition lasting 19 seconds gets underway at that point. Then at T plus 8 minutes and 5 seconds, the first stage landing burn will begin. Again, this booster, tail number 1069, is aiming for a landing on the drone ship, a short fall of gravitas. And for this particular recovery vessel, this will be the 59th time a booster. T plus 8 minutes, 27 seconds is about the time when that drone ship landing should occur. If you take a look at the live picture of the Falcon 9 rocket on the right-hand side of your screen, you can see a little bit of frost forming near the base of the first stage as that super cold liquid oxygen is flowing aboard those LOX tanks, or that LOX tank. T plus 8 minutes, 41 seconds. The Merlin vacuum engine will cease firing for now. For second stage engine cutoff, SECO 1. The engine will reignite at T plus 53 minutes, 39 seconds after exiting a parking orbit or going through a coast phase. That engine burn will last a brief 2 seconds, setting up the Starlink satellites to deploy from the Falcon 9 second stage at T plus 1 hour, 4 minutes, and 48 seconds. That'll be followed sometime thereafter by a third burn of the Falcon 9 upper stage. That's a deorbit burn to eliminate the risk of additional orbital debris. We're now T minus 26 minutes, 50 seconds and counting. A little less than 2 minutes away from the start of cryogenic helium being loaded onto the pressure vessels on the second stage, or helping to pressurize the propellant tanks on the second stage. Taking a quick look at our live chat here. I want to thank channel member Jeff Groves for being with us for 3 months. Thank you so much, Jeff, for your ongoing support. Who says, enjoying the stream as always. Glad to hear that. SG, a regular here with a $5 super chat. And a thumbs up, Corgi. Thanks, SG. Good to see you again. Marcus Gallegos joining us again this evening, one of our channel members as well, gifting a Spaceflight Now membership. Really appreciate that, Marcus. Thanks for helping to spread some generosity. And Bruce MacNicht. Apologies, Bruce, if I mispronounced your last name, but thank you so much for joining with channel membership at the mission specialist level. Glad to have you aboard. Thanks for being with us. Again, as a reminder, channel membership comes with the perks of discounts at our online shop, shop.spaceflightnow.com, as well as access to our member-only videos and views in 4K of all the launches lifting off from Florida Space Coast. And while we certainly appreciate those who are able to support us through channel membership or use the YouTube Super Chat feature or some combination thereof, another great way to help support us is quick and easy and free to do so. If you haven't already, we'd very much appreciate it if you hit the like button, share the stream, allow this content to reach more folks as we are a little under 25 minutes to lift off on a beautiful Sunday afternoon. Now T-minus 22 minutes, 30 seconds and counting. In just about 2 minutes, we should see the so-called big event from the strong pack as the feed lines are chilled prior to second stage LOX load. It's another good visual indication that things are proceeding on time this afternoon. So be sure to keep a weather eye for that, and we'll, of course, draw your attention to it as it comes up. Now T minus 20 minutes, 35 seconds and counting. Should see the start of the big vent just about any moment now. About 10 seconds or so. Oh, there we go. Around T minus 18 minutes, 3 seconds and counting. Got about another minute and a half or so of this big vent left. Then second stage LOX loading is set to begin at T minus 16 minutes. We're now T-minus 15 minutes, 23 seconds and counting. So you can see the big vent wrapped up about 40 or so seconds ago. And we are now into second stage LOX load. We're now T-minus 13 minutes, 5 seconds and counting. Of course, SpaceX is busy not only preparing to send up this Falcon 9 rocket in less than 13 minutes, but over at its other East Coast pad, Historic Launch Complex 39A, we are awaiting the rollout of the Falcon 9 rocket with the Crew Dragon Endeavour spacecraft attached to the top of it, set to roll out of the pad sometime in the very near future in support of the NASA SpaceX Crew 8 mission. That'll see the flight of 3 astronauts from NASA as well as a Roscosmos cosmonaut heading up for a 6-month crew rotation mission up to the International Space Station. As we've shared on social media, X in particular, the crew arrived about 1:45 is when their plane touched down over at Space Florida's launch and landing facility, formerly the shuttle landing facility. And we had the opportunity to hear from the crew members, ask some questions as they are continuing their quarantine and preparing to lift off from this pad coming up no earlier than Friday, March 1st at 12:04 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. So I want to go to some comments now from the commander of the mission, Matthew Dominic, who will be making his first flight to the International Space Station as soon as Friday.
I've been working at NASA for about 7 years, but because NASA's so awesome to work for, most people work at NASA for decades, so I'm still relatively a newbie at NASA with 7 years working here. But over that 7 years, it's been absolutely incredible to watch spaceflight explode here at the Cape with so many different rockets and new pads. In fact, I think about 2 visits ago, we were out here and we got to see a Falcon Heavy launch. And coming from military aviation, we're used to flying airplanes in formation, but to see 2 rocket boosters coming back in formation to land is incredible to me. So coming out here to the Cape every time, I'm a kid in the candy store for me. In fact, actually, normally we get to fly the T-38s out here for training, and actually that's my parking spot over there. Butch would say otherwise. But coming out here for training is great, and it's just an incredible time to be involved in spaceflight. Who would have thought 5 or 6 years ago that this would be the 5th flight of Endeavour that we get to go on? Who'd have thought 5 or 6 years ago that the competition for launch or the constraint to launch would be a launch pad, right? Like, we delayed our launch a few days because there's stiff competition to get out there to 39A. It's not a rocket constraint, it's a pad constraint. So with that, I'd like to say that we're super excited to fly as Crew 8. I'm super excited to fly with this crew. And Crew 7, we're coming for you.
I will say, having now spoken to Matthew Dominic twice, he is quite the cut-up, and I think if he ever wants to retire from his duties as a NASA astronaut, he has a bright future as a stand-up comedian. Just my 2 cents. As we get closer to the Crew 8 launch on March 1st, be sure to keep an eye out here on our YouTube channel for some profiles of the 4 astronauts, including Matthew, who you just heard from, as they get ready to lift off, some of them for the very first time heading up to the ISS. So, of course, now is a great time, if you haven't already, to subscribe to the channel. It's free and easy to do so. Be sure you have notifications turned on by clicking the bell icon when you do subscribe. We're now T-minus 9 minutes, 19 seconds and counting. I want to thank a few more folks for their support this afternoon as we continue to roll on towards the planned launch of the Falcon 9 rocket you see here on your screen. Space Nerd, one of our channel members, with a $2 super chat. Thank you so much, Space Nerd, who says simply, "Go Falcon." Channel member Callistia Lee with a very generous $20 super chat. Thank you, Callistia, who shares the message that I will echo. All you lurkers that are watching, hit the like button and share so others can find this live stream easier. It's free and easy to do. I will second that and say that the more likes we can accrue on this live stream before liftoff, the more folks can easily find this live coverage and enjoy a rocket launch to start off their week or round out their weekend, however you want to think about that. And finally, for now, Marcus Gallegos with a very lovely $10 super chat. Thank you so much, Marcus, and your continued support as one of our wonderful channel members. And a thanks to the more than 13,000 of you watching live. Hope to see those numbers continue to climb, and you can do so by hitting the like button to help out. Bring some more folks a rocket launch to close out this Sunday. We're now T-minus 7 minutes, 52 seconds and counting. Less than a minute away from the process of chilling down the 9 Merlin 1D engines at the base of the Falcon 9 vehicle. Flowing a little liquid oxygen through the plumbing and turbo pumps and protecting them from the risk of thermal shock and damage. With our remaining 7 minutes and some change, let's go ahead and briefly bring you up to speed on the Falcon 9 vehicle that's going to be launching today. This is the workhorse of SpaceX's flight fleet. Vehicle that stands 70 meters, or about 229 feet tall, with a diameter of 3.66 meters, or 12 feet, the majority of which is made up by the first stage. The bottom 2/3 of the rocket. Today's booster has flown 12 times before, going for number 13 today. This is booster 1069 in the SpaceX fleet. At the base of the first stage are the 9 Merlin 1D engines, which burn rocket-grade kerosene and liquid oxygen, producing 1.7 million pounds of thrust. Around the engine compartment are the black carbon fiber landing legs that are used to land the first stage on the drone ship. Above the first stage is the inner stage. It's a composite structure which consists of an aluminum honeycomb core that's surrounded by carbon fiber. In that image on the right-hand side of your screen, you can see the deployable hypersonic grid fins. These are titanium winglets that provide stability and steering for the vehicle as it falls back through the atmosphere tail first, like a big old dart towards the drone ship. Again, today, SpaceX is using a shortfall of gravitas. At the top of the inner stage are 3 mechanical latches that attach to the second stage. At first stage main engine cutoff, high-pressure helium is used to release those latches, and 4 pneumatic pushers ensure a clean separation. The second stage engine nozzle is housed safely inside the inner stage adapter until stage separation. Speaking of that second stage, the upper stage of the Falcon 9, powered by a single modified Merlin engine called a Merlin vacuum engine, or an MVAC engine. It's equipped with a large nozzle optimized for burns in the vacuum of space, hence the name. It does have a shorter variant that is pulled out sometimes. This produces more than 200,000 pounds of thrust. This upper stage will be fired twice on today's flight to place the 24 Starlink satellites into their intended orbit. Again, this is the first time SpaceX is flying 24 of these Starlink V2 minis at once. The MVAC engine burns the same propellant mix, RP1 and LOX, same as the first stage. It will ignite a third time after the deployment.
Pressing for strongback retract.
And we are just now getting SpaceX mission audio loops, so that is the call out you just heard. Strongback retract sequence set to begin in just a few seconds, so we'll go ahead and wrap this up momentarily. Upper stage will ignite for a third time for a deorbit burn, driving it back into the atmosphere, helping to eliminate the risk of thermal shock and damage. The top of the vehicle are the payload fairings. Inside are 24 Starlink V2 minis. They're made up of a carbon composite material that is 13.1 meters or 43 feet tall, 5.2 meters or 17.1 feet in diameter, and they'll be recovered further downrange by Doug. Taking a look at the Falcon 9 rocket there at the pad, you see the clamp arms underneath the payload fairing starting to open up as the strongback retract sequence begin, as we heard that call out moments ago. If you take a look at the crew tower, actually, worth noting, some new additions coming here. It's a little hard to see with the sun, but actually this angle is much better. You see those lines that come from the vehicle and swoop down towards the bottom right-hand corner of your screen. That's part of the emergency egress system, that same type of escape operation that SpaceX has over at Launch Complex 39A. It's part of crew rating this tower so that eventually this particular pad can support the launch of Dragon missions that'll have astronauts on board heading up either for a free flight mission or to the International Space Station. Now T-minus 3 minutes. Coming up on the conclusion of LOX load on the first stage.
Stage 1 LOX load is complete.
And there you hear that call out for stage 1 is concluded. Liquid oxygen load. Now about 2.5 minutes left before liftoff. Really appreciate the more than 20,000 of you that are joining us live this afternoon. If you haven't already, it'd be certainly a big help if you hit the like button, allow a few more folks to find their way to this live coverage, as we are now just about 2 minutes away from the liftoff of the Falcon 9 rocket. This is set to be SpaceX's 18th launch this year, as we're closing in on the end of February, if you can believe that. Less than 2 minutes to flight.
Stage 2 LOX load is complete.
And with that call out, the Falcon 9 rocket now fully fueled with 1 million pounds of propellant as we come up on the final minute 30 seconds before T0 liftoff. That venting you're seeing is
Ground gas closeouts.
a normal operating procedure, and that call out you just heard, the ground gas closeouts, is what you're seeing right now. Now about a minute to flight.
Falcon 9 is in startup.
With 45 seconds out, we should be hearing the SpaceX launch director shortly give their call that Falcon 9 is go for liftoff.
Go for launch.
with that call, we are now less than 30 seconds away from the flight of the Falcon 9 rocket from Space Launch Complex 40 at Cape Canaveral Space Force Station, getting ready to support 24 Starlink V2 mini satellites for the first time. 15 seconds. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Entered ignition. And liftoff of the Falcon 9 rocket. This booster supporting its 13th flight. The Falcon 9 has cleared the tower. Some great views from our tracking camera here at the press site. Our Adam Bernstein. Coming up onto 30 seconds into flight. Let's listen to the roar of those 9 Merlin engines as we watch views from Chuck Briggs. Down a little over a minute into flight. Coming up on max Q, the point of greatest aerodynamic pressure on the vehicle. And there you hear that call out for max Q as we're passing a minute 30 into this mission. Less than a minute to go until main engine cutoff. That call, they're thermally conditioning the Merlin vacuum engine for its burn to begin. Now approaching 2 minutes into flight. Now coming up on a few events in rapid succession. Coming up on MECO, followed by stage separation, second stage engine start, concluding with fairing deployment at T plus 3 minutes and 5 seconds. And there you see MECO. Stage separation. And that Merlin vacuum engine now igniting. Some great views from our friend Pete Karstens there at Max Q Productions. Coming up on 3 minutes into flight. 5 seconds thereafter, we'll see fairing deployment. You can see on the far left-hand side of the box that first stage continuing to move away as the hypersonic grid fins are deploying, and there go the payload fairings. Some great views as the setting sun is still catching the glint of those payload fairings, and on the right-hand side you see the Starlink satellites now exposed to the vacuum of space for the first time. And a great shot of the payload fairing from the perspective of the Merlin vacuum engine, the second stage cam on the bottom right-hand corner of your screen. Although we're still seeing them in Pete's tracking camera on the far left-hand side as they just drift out of frame here. We're now coming up on the 4th minute in flight. The next milestone we're going to be passing is at T plus 6 minutes and 19 seconds. That'll be the first stage entry burn beginning. If all things work out, we should be able to get our eyes on that first stage entry burn. We'll work to bring that to you.
Vehicles on nominal trajectory.
those few bursts that you're seeing there between the hypersonic grid fins on the Falcon 9 first stage and the box in the upper right-hand corner on your screen, those are the cold gas thrusters. Those are used to affect the attitude of the Falcon 9 first stage as it orients itself and prepares for that first stage entry burn. We're now T plus 5 minutes into flight. We actually may be seeing the Bahamas in the just off the corner of the Falcon 9 first stage in the box in the upper right-hand corner of your screen. Of course, as mentioned earlier in the broadcast, SpaceX struck a deal with the Bahamas to be able to position its drone ships closer to those waters and potentially help avoid some more aggressive dogleg maneuvers for missions launching further south as well. Coming up on 6 minutes of flight.
Stage 1 FTS has safed.
Coming up on the start of that first stage entry burn in just a few seconds.
Stage 1 entry burn startup.
And there you see that burn beginning on the left-hand side of your screen.
Stage 2 FTS has safed. Stage 1 entry burn shut down.
And some great views from the Falcon 9 first stage as it continues to orient itself towards the drone ship, a short fall of gravitas, as well as from the Falcon 9 second stage cameras you see there on the right-hand side of your screen as the burn of that Merlin vacuum engine continues. Real time, we are now 7.5 minutes into flight. A little bit of a delay here with the SpaceX video, so our countdown clock is just a little off sync with the feed coming in from SpaceX. So the callouts you're hearing from me, I'm calling things out in real time, and we'll also make note of where we are in the SpaceX count as well. Coming up on 8 minutes into flight in real time. The landing burn will begin at T plus 8 minutes and 5 seconds. So that's the time we're looking for on the SpaceX clock at the bottom of your screen. 10 seconds from now.
Stage 1 landing burn.
There's the call out, and you can see the start of the landing burn here. So we should see the drone ship start to come into view. There it is.
Landing leg deploy. Stage 1 landing confirmed.
And a good touchdown of SpaceX Falcon 9 booster 1069. 13 times up, 13 times down. This, of course, completing SpaceX's secondary mission on the Starlink 6-39 mission. As the MVAC engine shuts down, it goes into a parking orbit.
Nominal orbit insertion.
It'll stay in this coast phase until T plus 53 minutes and 39 seconds, after which, or at that point, there will be a brief 2-second burn of that Merlin vacuum engine, setting up the 24 Starlink V2 mini satellites to deploy at T plus 1 hour, 4 minutes, and 48 seconds. And with that, we're going to go ahead and start to wind things down. Another successful launch for SpaceX, as now their eyes and attention can turn towards the happenings over at their other pad here on the Space Coast. Historic Launch Complex 39A getting ready for the launch of the 3 astronauts and the 1 cosmonaut that made their way to the Kennedy Space Center just hours ago, as their quarantine continues on in Florida ahead of their planned launch to the ISS coming up this Friday. And for those who can't get enough of rocket action, you can track the rollout of the Falcon 9 rocket and the Dragon spacecraft supporting the Crew 8 mission over on our 24-hour live channel, Launchpad Live, right here on YouTube. And that'll be the first place that you can see that rollout action as it's happening. Want to thank a few folks for their support as we wind down our coverage before we get to the new launch and landing stats as they now exist, given the successful liftoff and successful booster landing of 1069. First, I want to thank Mel Roberts Harold, one of our channel members, for a $5 super chat. Mel says, another terrific launch. Amazing views by the cameramen and the best commentary. That's very sweet. Mel, thank you so much. And concludes by saying, thanks to everyone at Spaceflight Now. Well, thanks so much, Mel, for supporting us. Really appreciate that, and hope all is well to you and all your friends and family in the Windy City. Closing things out, as we always do before our final goodbyes, let's take a look at the mission stats as they now stand. This was the 13th flight of Falcon 9 booster 1069. This was the 303rd Falcon 9 launch to date, the 18th Falcon 9 launch of 2024. This was the 248th Falcon booster reflight, or the launch of a booster that has flown at least once. This was SpaceX's 18th orbital launch of 2024, the 101st SpaceX orbital launch within the last 365 days. This was the 169th SpaceX orbital launch from Pad 40, and the 224th overall launch from this particular pad. Graphically, this is where SpaceX stands as it is continuing to climb and catch up to, and they are hoping well surpass the total launch record of last year, set at 96 launches. They're hoping for at least 144, or an average of 12 per month by the year's end. Go up as high as 148, maybe even 150 launches. We shall see. Moving on to recovery stats, this was the 59th landing of a booster on the drone ship A Shortfall of Gravitas. This was SpaceX's 215th drone ship landing and the 277th overall SpaceX booster landing to date. Finally, moving out to the space industry around the globe, this was the 12th orbital launch from Florida, the 19th orbital launch from U.S. soil, the 21st orbital launch from a U.S. rocket company when you add in the 2 Rocket Lab missions from down in New Zealand. And this was the 38th overall orbital launch around the globe. How does that shake out to all the countries involved? Here's where we stand currently. The U.S., with 21 launches, has about 55% of the market. China, with 9, at just shy of a quarter of all launches on the year. The rest of the pie split evenly between India, Japan, Iran, and Russia. Of course, Russia getting ready to launch its own crew mission from the Baikonur Cosmodrome coming up in mid-March, including the launch of NASA astronaut Tracy Dyson heading up to the ISS. We had the opportunity to speak with Tracy as well as the quartet flying aboard the Crew 8 mission heading up to the space station as well. Be sure to keep it here at Spaceflight Now for both our roundup on the crew arrival that happened today. Check the website spaceflightnow.com for our coverage of that. And as the week goes on, our coverage of the Crew 8 profile pieces as well. Those will be posted here on YouTube. before we go ahead and button things up, want to thank Marcus Gallegos for gifting one last Spaceflight Now membership on our way out. We're T plus 16 minutes, 12 seconds into flight. Again, the second stage engine, the MVAC engine, is set to have a brief 2-second burn at T plus 53 minutes and 39 seconds, setting up for Starlink satellite deployment at T plus 1 hour, 4 minutes, and 48 seconds. I want to thank all the folks that help make these broadcasts happen here at Spaceflight Now. First off, our wonderful channel members who continuously support what we do here at the channel and on the website. Our wonderful moderators that have been doing the work to keep the live chat flowing and kosher. Astro Joe, Stephanie B, I see you joining us this afternoon from Australia. Good to see you. And some of our other mods that were helping out earlier as well. Thanks to all of you for your continued help and support with these live streams. Our thanks, of course, as well to our friends Pete Karstens with MaxQ Productions and Chuck Briggs for helping provide tracking views of the Falcon 9 throughout the mission today. Or Adam Bernstein, hard at work pulling double duty with some still photography as well as tracking the vehicle. You can see his content and work in addition to our other ace photographer here at Spaceflight Now, Michael Kane. You can follow both of these gentlemen over on X at ABurnNYC and MD Kane Jr. Our thanks as well to our editor, Stephen Young, as we continue to watch these live views of Space Launch Complex 40 as the strong back should start to come up in the next little bit here. And once again, just as a reminder, head on over to Spaceflight Now's Launchpad Live, our 24-hour live stream, to see views of the rollout of the Falcon 9 rocket and the Crew Dragon spacecraft supporting the Crew 8 mission. That rollout happening sometime in the next several hours or potentially through the overnight hours. As we are getting closer and closer to the launch, there are some procedural steps that need to happen, including the dry dress rehearsal of the crew, where they go through the motions of getting suited up in their flight suits and stepping on board the Dragon as they will on launch day. So all those launch day procedures need to happen in place, but of course, you got to have a rocket to do it. So I'll be keeping an eye on that, and you can watch that on Launchpad Live. Most importantly, though, want to thank you for taking part of your Sunday, being with us for another evening of live launch coverage. Always appreciate you taking some time out of your day and enjoying the sights and the sounds of all the launch vehicles lifting off from Florida's Space Coast. Looking forward to more getting added as time goes on. For all of us here at Spaceflight Now, I'm Will Robinson Smith. Be good to yourselves, be good to others, and we will see you next time. Have a good one.